Gotta put my phone on silence. Okay, let's, we have attendance.
Yes, you're good to go.
All right, anybody for public comment?
We have a couple people from the public. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand electronically now. And there's still a few people coming in because I just opened it up to the public. So we'll wait 1 minute, but there's 4 people from the public. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand electronically now and I will unmute you. I don't see anyone raising their hand.
There is a hand raised.
What?
There was a hand raised.
There
Then they lowered it,
Okay.
I guess.
No, it's raised
there
again.
We go. Thank you. Okay, Jim Bajak, you can unmute.
Paycheck.
Jim, you could unmute yourself and you'd be allowed to speak. There we go.
Hi, I'm Jim Bajak, representing Maxine Vanneau, and I've got 3 other individuals that are on this meeting that are part of our application team. I've got Andrew Vanneau, who's the son of Maxine Vanneau, who's the applicant. I've got John Casey, attorney John Casey, and Dr. Peter Pellegrino. So we're here for the new business for 24 Shorefront Park.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I don't mind if they present now and with a 2/3 vote, we could move on any action for new business.
okay.
And Mr. Bajak, if I just may ask quickly, it was our understanding that at the last meeting of the Norwalk Harbor Management Commission that you as the agent sort of self-tabled this issue. Is that now not the case?
Yes, I self-tabled it with the Harbor Management Commission, because we had very little time to prepare for that meeting. We were just informed about it like a day before it happened. We didn't realize it was on the agenda so quick.
Yeah, so I mean,
we decided it'd be better to just, table it, at least with the Harbor Management Commission and, meet with them in July.
Yeah, and I apologize. I mean, I think I would have given this a more thorough look for tonight. I just thought that there were other issues behind this where you as the agent were electing to delay this, but please continue though, Jim.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you've all looked over the material that I submitted, but just to kind of give you a summary of what we're proposing. We're proposing to perform dredging at the Vanneau dock to a depth of -8 feet mean low water, with an additional ½ foot of over dredge to allow the contractor to reach the full 8 feet of dredge depth. The dredging will be over an area of about 5,826 square feet, and it will remove about 1,173 cubic yards of sediment. We're in the process of coordinating with the Army Corps of Engineers for doing sediment sampling and testing, chemical testing. We've also hired Dr. Pellegrino to conduct a benthic study, which we forwarded the report, Dr. Pellegrino's report to you as part of the consultation form that we submitted. And basically, Dr. Pellegrino concluded that the proposed dredging should recolonize very quickly to the same level it presently is within at least a year and a half from when the dredging is completed. Dr. Pellegrino's on, I believe he's on this Zoom meeting. I don't know if you can confirm that or not. But if you have any questions with any technical aspect of his study, it'd probably be best if he responded to those questions. So I guess at this point, I'd open the floor for any questions and any comment.
I don't know. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing.
So I have a couple of questions to start, if I may, Jim. So as you may be aware, this property has been problematic.
Yeah.
Is there a history of deep enforcement violations at this
Actually,
property?
There was
Yes, I don't know.
there was
I don't like
an
it.
enforcement situation which we resolved.
I don't like it.
And what was the nature of them?
They were having we went ahead and got permits for reconfiguring their dock and for reconstructing their solid fill pier. And so we had all the permits in hand, and they went and hired a contractor. And the contractor did a few things that they were not supposed to do. They had put a couple of boulders in a wetland area, and they had expanded the footprint of the fixed pier, not the footprint, but the upper elevation of the fixed pier. So the DEEP asked us to get the boulders out of the wetlands and touch up a few things. And they went ahead and issued the permit, or the modification of the permit after that.
Jim, are you aware of any historical dredging at this particular site within the current footprint or the former footprint before the COP?
As you can see on the plans, there is a section of the proposed dredge area that was dredged in the past several times, I believe, as part of the South Norwalk Boat Club dredging for their fairway.
But what about within the footprint of the current dock array?
I'm not aware of any in the current footprint of the current dock, no.
All right. Can you or council or Dr. Pellegrino point to other issues or other examples within Norwalk or the state of Connecticut where de novo dredging was allowed at a private dock such to give deeper water access?
I'll defer that question to Attorney Casey. I
Please,
believe he has information on that.
please.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So for the record, my name is John Casey. I'm a partner with the law firm of Robinson and Cole. Happy to be here with you tonight as we are, as much as we can be with each other. So in response to the question, about 15 years ago, maybe it was a little less, one of the former DEP commissioners, Gina McCarthy, issued a declaratory ruling because a property owner a residential property owner was seeking to do maintenance dredging and then additional dredging, new dredging, because of siltation around his dock that really caused the old dredge footprint to be, for all intents and purposes, a bathtub. You couldn't you couldn't get to it during low tide. There was no purpose to dredge just the old footprint. And staff at that time, and some of you may recall this, I don't know if Jeff remembers, but the staff used to write a letter that always said, new residential dredging is not allowed, in so many words. And so the request to the commissioner was to challenge that determination by staff, saying that there's nothing in the statutes, there's really no state regulations that control dredging, but nothing in the statutes that prohibit new dredging at a residential property. And Commissioner McCarthy actually stated that it was not, that the department had no policy to prohibit new dredging at a residential property. And as long as, and that they would evaluate each application on its merits based on the conditions at the property. So following that decision, the Staub application in Old Lyme, which was at the mouth of the Connecticut River, just north of the I-95 bridge, received a permit for new dredging. It did have an old permit, but it had completely silted in, and actually under the DEP's interpretation of the COP statute, they initially found that the dredging wasn't continuously maintained and serviceable. But after a determination, which I included an analysis by Dr. Pellegrino, determined that the new dredging would not impact, would not conflict with any policies in the Coastal Management Act, wouldn't have any coastal resource impacts of concern, and they issued that permit. So that is one example. Jim and I practice in this area a lot. We know that new residential dredging isn't something that's typically sought by a residential property owner. Beyond just the permitting process, you are probably all aware, including even the Norwalk Cove Marina, the disposal aspect of dredging is a daunting it's a formidable hurdle. So dredging is not for everyone, and we fully acknowledge that most residential properties can exist with just a dock, but there's nothing in the regulations, or I should say statutes, that would prohibit the granting of a permit for new residential dredging.
Excuse me, I thought that Army Corps of Engineers were the ones that said no new dredging.
The Corps has there's no prohibition on new dredging by the Corps as long as it meets the standards for dredging.
Because last thing I knew, just as I'm going back 10 years ago, the Army Corps of Engineers said there'll be no more new dredging.
Of any type or just residential?
Of any residential stuff going on, any small dredging. Existing, yes, you can exist if it's existing, but you can't go out of the footprint that you have already.
I've had several conversations with the Army Corps about new dredging over the last 20, 30 years. And the contact that I have at the Corps, Diane Ray, she's been there ever since. And she's the one that we coordinate through. And I know on at least 2 instances, I had discussed with her the possibility of private individuals conducting new dredging. And she said, fine, just submit what you would normally submit and we'll review it. And if it meets our
Okay, did they
criteria.
dredge it?
What's that?
Did they dredge it? What you're saying?
No, we did not. We didn't, for various reasons, we didn't follow through with the permitting process.
So that's hearsay, basically.
Well, it's direct.
If it's not okayed by Army Corps of Engineers, then yeah, you can submit anything you want, whenever you want.
No, she
You know what I'm
was,
saying?
she expressed a neutral attitude towards the new dredging.
Mr. Johnson, what you may be thinking of is the general permits for Connecticut that the Army Corps issues. Those would allow, those cover maintenance dredging if you meet certain circumstances, but all activities under the Corps' either Clean Water Act or Rivers and Harbor Act jurisdiction, you can, there's no prohibition on any type of activity. You can apply for it, and if it meets their criteria, will typically give you your permit. Even if you might have to go through the individual permitting process, which sort of adds to the comment I made earlier, why most residential owners just stay away from dredging. They don't want to do the testing and everything. It's expensive and it's time consuming. So I think there's a lot of factors that go into whether or not to propose and pursue dredging.
Yeah, but honestly though, Mr. Casey, these are very wealthy individuals, and they have more than enough means to do that testing in an effort to increase property values at the expense of, say, a mudflat or any other subtidal zone, to be able to dock a 90-foot vessel where maybe a rib would be more appropriate. I mean, I don't think we could end up with our natural shellfish bed tracks looking more like Fort Lauderdale, for example. It's just, I think it's here.
Well, I think there's a policy question there. And we wanted to answer your policy question as whether there's a prohibition against it. So there's no prohibition against it. I think the issue becomes then, does the proposal meet the permitting criteria? And all we ask, in this process, whether it's of this commission, the Harbor Management Commission, the DEEP, the Army Corps, whomever, is that they just give it a fair review, look at it for its individual impacts, as each application should be reviewed, and determine whether, based on the conditions at the site, it'll have the impacts over which your commission, over which you have a concern. So that's why we went, and the Vignolts went through the effort to, they asked us at the start of this, what do? We just want to make this dock more effective, more usable. I mean, and can we dredge? Is there a prohibition? We said no, but this is, you want to go through a procedure, a step-by-step procedure. You need to know if you're going to have impacts, on the benthic environment, because that would be a showstopper right there. So that's why they hired Dr. Pellegrino. And you all have his report. The conclusion was that the benthic environment would not be adversely impacted. It would, and I don't want to, I know
Okay.
Peter's on the phone, he can speak for himself, but areas just to the north at the boat club that had been dredged in prior years had the same environment, same habitat, same critters as the area that hadn't been dredged, which shows that this area can recover after a dredging operation. It's like,
I got one question though. How come you're going for dredging when if you look down, all the docks down there, they're all on standoffs? Right where every place else doesn't have or didn't apply for it. So why should you try and start something on shellfish natural beds? Because you dredge, you're changing the flow of everything when you do that. So, I mean, I just don't understand. It's never been dredged before, but now you want to dredge it.
The-
And I'm
Sorry.
looking at all the other docks going down that same road.
we can't speak to the other property owners. You know, our focus is on whether the Vignal's property and their dock and the area under their dock, if that would have an adverse impact on the benthic environment. And Dr. Pellegrino's conclusion is that it would not. It would recover, and it would be the same again in as little as 12 to 18 months. And it would provide the same habitat. Currently now, there's no oysters. He found no oysters in 15 stations. He found one clam in 15 stations. I know it's a prohibited area. It's you know, you can't recreational shellfish there. It's so close to the boat club. I doubt any commercial shellfishermen use it as any sort of nursery area or anything like that.
It is a nursery, so when the oysters spat and the water flows out, those spats stick to shells and grow. It's a nursery area where it's feeding all the other grounds.
Just respectfully, I'd ask that you review the report, because Peter Pellegrino found no evidence of any oyster activity.
Right, and that's a snapshot in time, and that natural bed can certainly change over time. And one of the permit conditions that we generally offer with respect to ramps, piers, ramps, and floating docks is their winter removal rather. And that is expressly for the seed shell fishermen to have access that close to shore.
And I suppose we understand that. And I know Peter's out there, and he's studied Norwalk Harbor for actually most of his career. So he has a very good view of it. And I guess, Peter, if you can hear me, if you could just click that.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, Peter's good. Okay. Step in, because I don't profess, I'm not a professor like you were. But I guess one of the points to Mr. Bartusch's comments would be that being a snapshot, yes, but also the dredging is just a temporary impact. So once it's done and things go back to the way they were, it'll provide the same habitat that it currently does. So Peter, I guess I would just ask if you could summarize your report. You're the expert here.
Well, as you said, that you know, I've been looking at Norwalk since 1975, where I worked as a volunteer for Dr. Kalman, who was head of the health department. Obviously, Dr. Kalman is deceased, but periodically, ever since then, I've been looking at Norwalk. We got a community development block grant to study Norwalk for 2 years. We got funding from the Seaport Association, from King Industries. So I just completed a report in 2016 summarizing the long-term changes in Norwalk. And the question here, I think, is you're all right, but the problem is dredging is dredging, no matter what reason for the dredging, whether it's to maintain a channel, maintain a marina, to put a dock in, the consequences are the same. You're going to destroy invertebrate life. There's no getting around that. The area of the dredging will depend on how much invertebrate life is destroyed. The question is, what happens after? I mean, any harbor like Norwalk can't survive without dredging. I mean, channels need to be dredged, marinas need to be, so dredging is ongoing, and it will continue to be ongoing. So the question here is, from my task is, you know, it doesn't make any difference to me what the dredging is for. The consequences are the same. And what you have to look at is what happens after. I mean, the dredging is going to kill organisms. There's no getting around that. It's going to do it. The question is, what happens after? Do things gradually return to normal? Do the conditions remain the way they are after dredging? And here you have a nice laboratory right next door, South Norwalk Boat Club, where you had a dredging maybe I'm wrong, but I found that maybe 2014 it was dredged. I don't know if that date is correct, but you have a perfect example of, you can study the before and the after. And here we have in South Norfolk, we have the conditions returning to almost identical to what they currently are at 26 Shorefront Park. So it doesn't make any difference to me what the dredging is for. That's up to you people, but the consequences and the results are the same no matter what the dredging is for. In South Norwalk, things return to normal. Now, I don't know if it took a year and a half, 2 years or what, because I wasn't there when the dredging took place. But I know for a fact that things are almost identical to that area that they currently are at 26 Shorefront Park. And I don't know what else to say.
So are you arguing that?
I'm not arguing at all.
No, I understand. So there are a number of pier, dock, and ramp structures around Shorefront Park, and I understand the three of you are not representing any of them. It's just at 26. I mean, would you advocate or recommend that any and all of them could be dredged, including the mudflats that extend out to the west?
I think
Just with the sole reason that it would repair itself?
I don't
And
recommend.
I can tell you that there's data that goes back more than 100 years that does show benthic differences, and that there are aerial images that clearly show changes over decades.
I obviously can't go back 100 years, but I'm getting there, but not quite there yet. I can only testify to what exists today at these particular sites. I don't know what goes on those other docks. I have no idea. I haven't sampled there, so I can't make any judgment on it. But I know for a fact that the conditions in terms of invertebrate community structure, the organisms that are there, all the statistical tests that I did, they're virtually identical to 26 Shorefront Park. Now, whatever that means to you is different from. I mean, I don't know what it means to you, but that's the way it is. Yes, sir.
So
Jeff has his hand raised.
Jeff?
Pete, I don't want to step in front of the commissioners, but it might help if I shared my screen. And I have a photo. I took several photos recently of this area. It might be
do.
helpful for the discussion. Let me see if I can do it. Can you see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
You guys see that? Then I have some others as well.
Was that
So
height?
I apologize to the other commissioners. I had not been prepared to ask questions about this because we were waiting for the next Harbor Commission meeting. But if you allow me to, I could maybe ask a couple of questions. But this area along all of Shorefront Park, and I've got another one that shows the whole area. It doesn't matter that there's no populations of shellfish there in terms of our policy. Our policy was that to protect shellfish resources, which include both the populations and the habitat necessary for the.
I'm not arguing that fact at all with you. That's perfectly right. I'm just saying.
Why don't I finish
what we found? I mean.
Well, can I finish my questions?
Yeah. No, I'm sorry.
All right, so we have a letter that we recently received from the Bureau of Aquaculture, and I think it's dated, only a week ago or so. And that letter expresses the Bureau of Aquaculture's concerns about dredging in this area. So perhaps you, when I get finished with my other questions, you might be able to respond to that letter and whether you think they're valid comments. And then another question is how much water is available now at low water for the applicant to have access to the harbor. And I also might mention that I'm very familiar with Attorney Casey's example of the declaratory ruling that affected a property, was concerning a property in Southport Harbor. And for members of the Shellfish Commission now, Commissioner Frank testified at the public hearing on that property, and that area never was dredged. So I guess my questions are that, my first question is, how much water exists there now? And why isn't that reasonable enough water for access from a residential dock? And what's your response to the Bureau of Aquaculture's concerns about the project?
Well, as
I
far
could-
as I'm concerned, I'll just address the Bureau of Agriculture. The Bureau of Agriculture's role is to protect shellfish. So I would think that their philosophy is any alteration, whatever it is negative to shellfish. I mean, that's their opinion. That's their view, and I can't argue with that. I can't argue with somebody's view or the aquaculture's view. But I'm just reporting on what current conditions are, and you know, it is what it is.
I can respond to the question about what the existing water depth is at the marina. As you can see on the project plans that we sent you, around the dock area itself, the water depth is about 1 to 1.5 feet deep at mean low water. So that means that, like an extra low tide, there's probably less than a foot of water there, probably close to 4 to 6 inches. And as you get closer to the fairway for the South Norwalk Boat Club, it gets a little bit deeper, around 2 to 3 feet.
So is your argument then, Jim, that because of those water depths at low tide, that doesn't provide the property owner with reasonable access to Norwalk Harbor?
That's correct, based on, you know, what they project as their use of the dock.
This is John Casey, if everyone can hear me. There was a couple of questions I just wanted to respond to add my voice to what Jim and Peter said. One thing about David Carey's letter is I don't know that he read Peter's report. He talks about the river bottom being a hard bottom, but that's not reflected in the actual study that Peter did. It was silty. And while we understand that the interest here is to protect, you know, all of that shellfish habitat, we think that a temporary disruption caused by this dredging, which is not a lot of dredging in the big scheme of things, it will have a temporary impact only on the benthic community, which currently does not include any significant shellfish resources. So once it's done and the sedimentation, you know, clears as it would if they were dredging 10 yards to the north and at the boat club, once it clears and the invertebrate life starts to come back to the benthic community, as Peter said, it will return to its former state, and that, you know, allowing this dredging here, and to follow up on a question, like, would we be in favor of dredging just anywhere, any mud flats or anything? No, that's the point I hope to make when we started with this, when we started with the family, the applicants. You know, you need to know what you're dealing with. If it's a sensitive resource, then the answer is no. I mean, part of what's going on here is you're right adjacent to a previously dredged area. And even Jeff's aerials show how this dock, how it faces north, it really is in the shadow of that dredge footprint for the boat club. And so given that, and given that that area very close to it has been, you know, historically disturbed over the years, that allowing a temporary disturbance for the applicant to allow better use of an existing dock to avoid any issues with
Awesome.
Pardon? Any
You're-
issues with getting in and out of the dock or disturbing the bottom with prop dredging or anything like that, this would be the appropriate place for it. Not every proposal in the coastal area is appropriate.
Is there Spartina noted adjacent to the property?
I'll leave that to Jim.
There's Spartina, but it's quite a distance away from the dock.
So I take that as a yes. Is there an intertidal oyster bed of significant population to the immediate south of the groin?
That I don't know. I mean, that's outside the proposed dredge area.
Correct, but you're saying that that dredging area, maybe Dr. Pellegrino can speak to this. So dredging there will have no effect on the Spartina, no effect on finfish species, which would interact with that Spartina at higher tide levels, no effect on the intertidal oyster area and the recruitment of same and the distribution of gametes and larvae as it relates to hydrological changes in the area.
I'll jump in first. This is John Casey, just for the record. So we did get the DEP fisheries consultation form back, dated June 23rd. And Bruce Williams there determined that the project will not significantly impact any fisheries and or habitat, as long as we dredge in the standard dredge window. So no dredging February 1st through May 15th or April 1st through June 30th. We'd be in the regular window. So that's from Bruce Williams at the DEP's fishery division. So he did not find it would have a significant impact on fin fisheries. So sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make sure the commission was aware of that, because that came in after we submitted the form. So I apologize. I think the question to Peter was whether he thought the dredging would have any impact from his perspective on any resources to the south of the groin. And
Well, I think what you have to do is consider, would there probably be any measurable impact? I can't say that there's not going to be any impact, but will it be measurable? Is it probable? Look, you can be struck by a meteorite walking to your car, but how likely is it that it's going to happen? It's not likely. So, I mean, yeah, there's a possibility that some kind of impact could occur, but how likely is it? And as far as I'm concerned, it is not likely. Look, I wasn't hired to advocate any kind of dredging at all. I was hired to document existing conditions, and that's exactly what I did. So. Other than that, I really can't say anything. I mean, anymore, unless you have any questions. Yes, sir. Well, I mean.
Pete, Jeff has his hand raised. Go ahead, Jeff, he's muted.
Is that okay? I don't want to, again, go before the other commissioners. I'm going to share my screen once more if I can, or at least another time. But when we're talking about reasonable access to navigable water and the DEP's basic policy for that, why couldn't the same argument you're making now apply to these other property owners, saying that our docks aren't usable at low water, and therefore we should be allowed to dredge too? It's the same argument. And does not DEP have a policy that reasonable access is not defined based on the size of the boat that the applicant wants to have accommodated at the dock? How do you deal with that? Well, I know you say that there's no preclusion. It's, applying for a permit is not precluded, but one of the issues that Mr. Carey brought up, the precedent-setting nature of this argument, that these other structures along the shore and in other towns could use the same argument, and then you have a significant cumulative impact. And what allows you to argue that you should have access at all stages of the tide? And that's somehow a right that you have. And that's my other question, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, John Casey, for the record, again, to respond to Jeff. Every application needs to be taken on its own merits. So if you're looking at a property further to the south that's has a longer intertidal area, longer area to dredge, you have to consider those impacts if that property owner were to come to you. All you have before you now is the Vignolt's application. In DEP hearings, I've done a number of hearings where someone was the first dock on a shorefront, and the neighbors complained and said, everyone's going to want a dock. We can't let this first one. And DEP hearing officers and the commissioner, different commissioners over time always said, you know, the prospect that someone else may apply for something is not a permissible consideration for us. We have to look at each thing in, in isolation. If something, if 5 people applied all at once, well, maybe then you could look at the cumulative impacts of 5 docks or 5 dredging projects in a row. But you can't deny one dredging project or one dock simply because someone else somewhere could possibly apply for a dock or a similar dredging. I reject that argument, and I understand the concern from a policy point of view, but if that's a policy and there's areas where there should be no dredging, well, then what the appropriate governmental agency should do is set a rule and say there's no dredging here whatsoever. You don't even bother asking us for it. But that's not the rule. That's not the way things occur here. Each applicant gets to make his or her application, and it needs to be evaluated on the merits. We can always point to the scary, camel's nose under the tent situation, but that doesn't mean that this application shouldn't be fairly considered. It's a unique situation. It's adjacent to an existing dredged area. It'll overlap part of that dredged area. As to whether it provides more access, what I would say in response to that, and Jeff probably knows this, is if you propose a dock and you need a 40-foot pier, and because of the nature of the waterfront, the 40-foot pier will allow your float to be in 4-foot deep water. Deep might give you that if it's not going to impact any other resources unnecessarily. So they'd prefer to give you a 30-foot pier, but they'll look at the circumstances and say, you know what, for 10 more feet, we get better access. We don't have a boat sitting on the bottom. We don't have to have a boat lift. We don't have to worry about benthic impacts at low tide. We don't have to worry about a boat sitting on the bottom. We'll give you that. We will balance, and this is what the cases say. We'll balance the applicant's littoral rights, which includes it includes the right to have a dock, but also the right to dredge channels. It just has to be consistent with the statutes. So DEP will balance those two things. So to the picture that Jeff showed, the people further down on Shorefront Park, they might want a 300-foot long pier to get out to the channel. But DEP will say, no, that's unreasonable. So everything has to be balanced. Here we have an existing dock. It's been there forever, relative. It's built into a groin. It has, it's fully permitted. It's next to a dredged area, previously dredged area, and the dredging that's proposed would not have significant long-term impacts on the environment. So that's why it's being proposed. After the dredging's done, it's our expectation that The Benton community will recover. The applicant will have use of a fully functional, almost 24/7, if not completely 24/7 dock. And no one will know the difference at the end of the day. The public won't know the difference, and I don't think the shellfish will know the difference at the end of the day. If they want to come back to that area, they will come back. The community will not change significantly enough to take that area out of their potential natural nursery area.
Well, I guess I just say, again, sorry for interfering or interrupting, but if the dock has been there forever, that means it's been used, I'm assuming, for boating access for some period of time. And that previous access was, I guess, acceptable to previous property owners. And now this property owner is asking to expand that access. And the judgment is that reasonable? And how do you balance that? And my understanding has been that the DEP is not considered that dredging to accommodate the size of the boat that the applicant wants to accommodate at the dock is necessarily reasonable access. So that's a question that the Harbor Commission will be taking up next month, or not next month, later this month.
But I would say, why punish a property owner? Why would, just like with the dock example, why would you say, we'll give you a 30-foot pier, but we're not going to give you a 40-foot pier, even though that gets you deeper water, just because someone else whose land will never really let them get to 4 feet of water unless they had a 200-foot pier. We're not going to let that person, have 4 feet of water. They get 18 inches of water. So you only get 18 inches of water. The rule isn't everyone gets 18 inches of water at low tide. That's not the rule. The rule is what's reasonable for the property. So if it's reasonable for the property to have a dock and a small dredged area, and there's dozens of them, including in Norwalk, I mean, that just, that were now they're maintenance dredged areas. But we all appreciate that residential areas get to be dredged. And there's no reason that they can't be anymore. So I would say, reasonable isn't just 18 inches of water at low tide, and tell people you're stuck with it. It's what's reasonable for the property. And what's reasonable for the property here is full access, because there's no additional impacts, no long-term additional impacts that are going to occur with this project.
I'm sorry again, but what historically, through all these years of the coastal program and the regulatory program, what's reasonable hasn't been left to the determination of the applicant. It's left to the determination of the regulatory agency, which is responsible for the public trust, the public trust resource. So the applicant can argue, yes, this is reasonable that in our eyes, but that's not the decision maker. The decision maker is the public agency, which is deep, and you know what their policy has been for over all these years. So I would just argue that what's reasonable is not up to the property owner to make the final determination. It's, as you know, it's the regulatory agency that does that.
I know, but sometimes the final arbiter is a court of law.
Right. But we're not to that point yet.
We are not. And I'll just say my experience is in most circumstances, the applicant, and Jim could probably talk to this more than I, they work with the regulators to come up with a reasonable accommodation. And that always doesn't, and that often, it depends on the area. In different towns and different areas of towns, you might have 24 hours of deep water around your dock. In other places, in Greenwich, you're going to have 6.5. It's just the nature of the topography and the cove that you're in. So you got to sort of play it as it lies. And I would say in this circumstance, what's reasonable If we, if we look at it piece by piece, I think the question is, if we dredge this, what's the impact on shellfish resources? It's not long-term, it's temporary. The evidence suggests that, highly suggests that it'll return to its pre-dredge state, which means it'll provide the same habitat. And
Could I add something? This is Jim Bajek. Jeff, to speak to what you were just saying, we did coordinate with the deep on changing the dock configuration, which is existing now and permitted. And the deep authorized the Vanots to have a finger float 35 feet long. Now, you would think, any reasonable person would think that to have a finger float 35 feet long, that allows you to have a larger boat at that dock. We're not talking about a dock here that has a float that's 10 by 10, where a large boat would have a lot of difficulty offloading and loading and just being tied up.
Yeah, but
This dock is actually set up for having a larger boat if the water depth were there.
yeah, I realize that, Jim, but honestly, I think with respect to the harbor management and maybe even Shellfish, although to a lesser degree because it was done through a COP, that larger marina, if you will, was snuck by the rooster. I don't think that if harbor management realized that there would have been a favorable consultation in that regard.
I mean, we went through all the channels that we needed to
No,
go through.
I realize you did, but frankly, I think that was missed locally through no one's fault. So,
Well, it is what it is.
I understand, Jeff.
Did you, Jim and John, did you have a pre-application conference with Deep over the dredging proposal? The current dredging proposal?
we had, we emailed back and forth with them and provided them with Peter's study. We haven't heard from them since then. And, it's, they, as expected, their initial response was new residential dredging. And we said, yes, new residential dredging. And we advised them that we thought the best thing was to go through the process and go through the consultation process and obtain all the forms and the opinions of the agencies and go forward from there and ask them to keep an open mind. And I'll just make one other point. The Coastal Management Act talks of, that decisions are made, and I know you're not bound by the Coastal Management Act, but decisions are made, and they added this in 2012, in consideration of the property rights of the applicant. And also, economic factors come in. Now, most of the time we consider economic factors on a project like the State Pier in New London, bigger things like that. But again, the idea that a residential property owner wants to improve their property, if they wanted to, and the notes have improved that property significantly. I mean, that's a benefit to them, but it's also a benefit to the town. As people improve their properties and the values go up, obviously, they pay more taxes. And while not in your, realm of concern, but it's a factor that I think needs to be balanced in terms of if they're doing that and it's not having the adverse environmental impacts that people would normally be concerned with, then it could have an overall net benefit. There's nothing in the coastal management statutes that talk about, as I said, punishing waterfront property owners, for wanting to have a deep dock or wanting to have a longer dock or wanting to have a bigger boat. I mean, it always seems like those are like such bad things. I mean, why is that a bad thing?
I just think that's a bad choice of words. I mean, punishment's really strong.
Yeah, and I'm sorry.
Especially for the poor folks who may not be able to afford a 12-foot rib, but someone else should have a 35 or 40-foot center console. I mean, that's just, I don't think we should go there, honestly.
Well, but that's the nature of the world too. I mean,
I understand.
the marine industry needs people with 34-foot center consoles, and they need people with 12-foot ribs.
Okay,
and
so
we need-
pursuant to Robert's rules, I'd like to put a motion on the floor for a 2/3 vote to move this to new business tonight, such that if the Shellfish Commission so desires that they'll vote on this to make some determination tonight or not.
I make a motion.
I second it. I second Steve's motion.
All in favor? Aye.
All right, so guys, if you want to hang on for new business, that's great, but let's, Mr. Chairman, if we could keep going, that would be good.
Okay, thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, how about approval of the minutes?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Do I hear a second?
You got a second right here, Pete.
All in favor? Aye. Secretary's report.
No report.
Oh, okay. Let's go with committee reports. The Health Department.
Yes, for June, we had 2.43 inches of rain. The average, last year's June was 1.83. The average for June is typically 4.19 inches of rain. Had no bypass events that I was made aware of. We had 2 closures for the Shellfish on June 14th for rain, 0.58 inches. And again on the 19th at 0.7 inches. I'm sorry, 0.7. And that's it.
Okay. Wastewater treatment plant, we don't have anyone here for that. Water quality. Joe. Unmute.
Yeah, we're good. Our meeting today mostly consisted of putting together a list of recommendations that has gone into a committee. And we're going to present to the different commissions as well as other city agencies in regards to how to improve water quality here in Norwalk. And we also did a revision of the mission statement. Final copy should be ready literally within the next week or two. And I'll let it go at that.
Okay. Permits.
He's not here.
Tom's not here. So the police aren't here. Advisory's not here. Water was 67.4 Sunday.
That's not that bad.
Well, I was in for a second. Harbor management. Jeff, were you going to say something or?
I said enough already. I think I didn't intend to. But
We actually set a world record for our meeting the other night because there was the application that Bajak put in was removed, and we zipped through that meeting in an hour, which is like a world record for the Harbor Commission.
Oh, all right. You have anything to say, John?
we have many. I think by next month, Pete, we'll have the recommendations for reducing the turbidity that may be associated with the Walk Bridge project. Our consultant continues to work on that. So it's, even though we're not saying much tonight, there's many things that we're working on.
It's in the works.
In the works, yes.
And there was an article in a newspaper. I sent Steve, I think I copied on it. Jeff, I sent you also that grant that the city had gotten. And one of my recommendations, I wrote a letter to the mayor, Casey, and King, is to take some of that money to do this study along the river and all the coastline and the Norwalk waters find out what the heck is going into the river or into our sound. Yeah, Jeff?
Yeah, but not only that, John, we understand that planning and zoning is going to be pursuing a waterfront related study of industrial zones on the waterfront. And I think we want to get involved with that up front, which is something we talked about writing a letter to planning and zoning so that we can make clear the Harbor Commission's interests and the Shellfish Commission's interest as well should be part of that. Any planning and zoning study that affects waterfront uses is of interest to both commissions. But
Definitely.
no, that's
Anything
all.
else? That's it? Okay. Approval of the committee reports.
Make a motion to approve them.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, old business. We had,
Yeah, so just quickly, Pete, so I owe Mr. Hiltz a consultation form on 14 Shore Haven, and I was in touch with him yesterday, so I'll get that out over the weekend.
okay, no problem. How about any old business we have?
Can I pick something up real quick? You know, I sit through these the last couple of Wilson Point and this, and it gets pretty heated. I know Zoom is convenient. I know COVID does to have a Zoom, but to bring it back to being normal where we meet, I think there's a lot of balance to that, to where we can really get together and we could talk. You come on a Zoom, I feel like everybody, I know it's public out there for the public, but the people can come and talk to us, not just pop in on this and just listen to what's going on. We're not hiding anything, but I think we should go back, or at least try to go back to having our meetings live. Not
I
on
agree.
Zoom.
I've been pressuring the city to do just that. I thought we might have had our June meeting, but that was a no. I'm pushing for our July meeting. I just got another, my second email this week from Michelle, because I stay on her and she keeps going to the powers to be. And they still haven't come up with a definitive answer of what they're going to do with the commissions, what they'll allow them to do as far as meetings are concerned.
Well, you got Board of Education, they're meeting up there. I just think it's nice for us to meet. I feel like
No question about
listen.
it.
I do too, Joe. I just think that the option of hybrid would be beneficial. I mean, I'm in a hotel tonight out of state, and if this option wasn't available to me, I wouldn't be here tonight and there wouldn't be a quorum.
Well, I think we should still have meetings, but I also think people should be available this way, the way you are today, at all times.
So you're talking Zoom and live, you're talking a hybrid, you're talking both.
Right. I don't see anything wrong with it.
It's convenient. I just don't think it's effective. I really
I mean,
don't.
it's all set up, but I'm like tonight, we only got 3 of us.
I know.
So we wouldn't have a quorum if he couldn't be here. And let's say we met.
Yeah, good
I
point.
think what we should do is try and find how we can we only have 5 people on our committee. We can stay apart far enough in the community room or in the health department's community room and put 5 or 6 chairs for people to sit. That's the most we ever get. You know,
Plus, when the DOT comes, they come with 700 people every time.
who?
DOT.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay, well,
Let's go on.
New business.
Okay, so this 26 Shorefront Park was moved to new business from public comment.
Well, 2 things.
Okay.
I think we should table it till Harbor Management does theirs. and we have more than 3 people in our quorum.
I agree. I second that. I agree with that.
Just as a definitive, another added thing, and I think Harbor should take that position as well, that they should wait to see, they're waiting for answers back from Deep
And Army Corps.
and Army Corps on certain issues. I mean, I don't think we can evaluate without having those opinions up
Right.
front as well.
Plus, what were the test results? We didn't hear them.
Can
You
I
know what I
throw
mean?
2 cents in?
What?
All right, Joe.
Can
Go,
I
Joe.
throw 2 cents in about the dredging thing? First of all, realistically, he's not gonna do one dredging. He's gonna have to do it again in 5 to 10 years, and then again in another 5 to 10 years, and that's gonna be continuously on and on. Second, he's not improving his property value. He does not own the mud flat. He's not getting taxed for the mud flat or the dock at this present time. So that's not true. And Pete Pellegrino, if my memory serves me correctly, wrote an article way back when, in the 70s, that we had approximately, in 1 cubic meter, 10,000 invertebrates living in a cubic meter of sediment. If that's correct, that is a loss of food resource for fish that are in that area. And you can talk to any of the guys that live at South Norwalk Boat Club, they get a lot of fish, and they get a lot of fishing off the dock. If you've ever been there, there's always guys fishing off the dock. There's always kids fishing off the seawall. And they're getting their food right off the mud flat. So you're removing a source of food. So it's not as clean and simple as they tried to get you to believe. But just my 2 cents.
Okay. Glad to hear it, Joe.
Thank you.
Any other thing on new business?
No, but I think we should formalize this
Vote.
discussion.
Motion.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump, guys. Ciao.
Bye,
Ciao.
John.
Okay, make a
Take
motion
care.
to table this till we have more investigation done. Or we find more answers.
That's a motion. I second that, Pete.
All in favor? All right, okay. Any other new business?
Pete,
Um,
who is this Sharon on here? I don't know who that is.
What was that?
That's on
me.
the,
I'm the secretary with Telesco.
Yes,
okay, so
I do
you're
your
the-
minutes.
okay, all right, good.
yes.
Just curious, just wondering who was there.
Oh, okay. All right, our next meeting is going to be August 5th.
a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
I
Okay.
second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
See you later, bye.
Have a
Bye-bye.
good week.
Thanks,
Joe, you really
guys.
don't know everybody in town.
Yeah,
No.
have a happy